Hi, guys, and welcome to another episode of The Father's Rhythm. So, in this particular episode, we're going to be proving if God is real or not. Yeah, you heard me. We're going to prove if God is real. And you know how we're going to do that? We're going to do that through you. You are going to prove to you if God is real. So, let's get into it. Okay. So I'm going to suggest that there are two ways in which we prove a particular reality. Now, one way is by a hard fact, so that is scientific. So something that we can measure. For example, the speed of light. We can measure the speed of light. We can measure the weight of something. We can measure the melting point of gold by putting it in a fire, and we know what temperature it needs to get to before it begins to melt. So here we have a hard fact. And another way we can prove if something is real or a reality or a truth is by experience. Now, I'm going to suggest to you that as an intelligent and emotional being that you are, and I don't mean you cry all the time, although I do shed my fair share of tears, we generally live out of this place, the place of experience. Because we are intelligent, because we are emotional, and because our experience of life is subjective, we have to use experience to gauge our opinion, our reality, and basically our proof of something or not. So let me give an example, or like I did the hard facts one. If you go to a theme park, you pay your ticket price. You go in, you enjoy the rides. On the way out, you play on those flipping machines that they've got that are extortionate, by the way, and they probably cost more than the ticket by the time you come out. See how I've formed an opinion? But yeah, so you go in there, you have an experience of that theme park. You come out, and your experience then forms an opinion of what you thought of that. Now, Joe Bloggs could come next to you, and he could say, well, this is what I thought of the park. It might be totally different to you. Both are subjective experiences, and both are relevant because they are true to you. Now, what generally couldn't be done in the scientific field is I cannot come up next to you and say, well, the speed of light is actually 100 miles an hour. Because you can say, no, I can measure it by this hard fact. It is this, and that is the absolute truth. And one would be wrong, and one would be right. But when we're trying to measure something that is, for example, emotional and an experience of something, it then becomes subjective. Now, I get it. This video is meant to be proving or not, is God real? So let's delve a little bit further into that bit. Okay, so, the hard facts that we have around us is that this creation, as we see, the trees and the birds and wherever you're sitting, it exists. It is real. You can measure it to some degree, most of it, and you can say that the hard fact, the scientific fact, is that it is real. Now, one may deduce from this evidence that God is real because they look at creation, they look at how they think creation is sublime, how the ecosystem works, and how everything seems to be meticulously set together in its way, and they can deduce from this evidence that God is real. But then person B may take the same line of evidence and say, actually, I have an atheistic viewpoint on this, which means that they don't believe in a God. For their own set of reasoning, perhaps they see decay as a reason for the non-existence of a loving God. Or perhaps they see the stars in the universe that seem to have no life in them and say, well, where's God in that? Why is there no life in this? This seems to me like more of a random accident. Now, as you can see from the same, if you will, evidence, you could deduce two different opinions on that based on the hard facts that we have. But that's going to be no good for you, because what we want to do is we want to empower you to prove to yourself if God is real or not. And I would like to propose to you that it cannot be done by the means that I've just mentioned. I mean, perhaps you're one that looks at the world and the way it is and says, yes, of course there is a God. But perhaps actually you're the opposite. Or perhaps you're on the fence. Because of creation, it makes you think, but you don't really know where you're at with it. Now, I would suggest that you will need to use this second line of evidence that we suggested earlier, which is experience. Now, as an intelligent being, as a conscious being, experience births your life. Your experience of life is who you are today. the pain that you've gone through, the joy that you've experienced, the environments that you've went in that have shaped you, made you feel uncomfortable, from your jobs, from your nursery all the way through schooling, your entire experience of life, what you've been taught, what you've chucked away, what you've learnt new, that has formed part of who you are, and that is a subjective experience. So you could say that you are the sum total of your experiences. Now, God, certainly the God that I propose to you, is a God of experience. He's a God who is love. Now, love outworked is an emotion, okay? Well, part of love is an emotion. I believe that love is far bigger than that, but God is emotional as a being. God is a being. We are in the likeness of God. This is the God who I'm proposing to you. So if we want to prove that this God is real, if we want to prove that this God loves us, that his joy is for us and towards us, that he is protective with us and over us, that he has our best interest in mind, we're going to have to use a form of measurement that is non-physical. We can't measure these things like love, for example, with a ruler. We can't measure joy by weighing it, etc., etc. And you will know that because you've experienced those things yourself. They are real to you, although you cannot measure them. And God is in the same manner. God must be experienced to essentially prove, and then we can actually trust the evidence that we have through our own experience. In the same way, for example, that if you get a takeaway, someone knocks on your door with a lovely smile. That smile makes you feel a certain way. You can't measure that smile necessarily or weigh it or how fast it is, but that smile makes you feel a certain way. You then open your takeaway and you taste. You can't measure what you're tasting, but you taste it and you think, wow, this is super tasty. You then form an opinion. That then becomes your reality. You probably go back to that takeaway place. I want to propose to you that God is the Domino's of this universe. He's better than Domino's. But he can be experienced, okay? No, you can't order him, so to speak. And no, you can't eat him, really, although you can enjoy him. In fact, there's a Bible verse that says, taste and see that the Lord is good. So maybe in some way you can have a little chew on God. I don't know how you've taken that. Anywho, my point being is that God is a God to be experienced. And the way that we can prove that he is real is by embarking on an experiential journey that will testify to God's love and God's reality in our lives. Now, in the same way as we use the example of the theme park, your experience of God will become your reality. Joe Bloggs right next to you might not experience it in the same way, but it doesn't make it any less important or any less real because it is your reality. So for me, the truth is God is real. You can't take that away from me because my experience is that God is real. Perhaps you can say why you don't think he is, but my question would always be, why has that been your experience? Have you opened up in willingness to the experience that God can perhaps give you or that you can have together with God? So let me get into something here. So my first real, the beginning of my awakening, let's say I was living in Moscow and I had I'm going to cut this super, super short, but I had a willingness to experience God. Perhaps where you're at now, if you've watched a few of these videos, perhaps you're stirred and you say, I'm willing, I'm willing to experience God. I'm willing to have some sort of relationship with God or find out who God is or what God is or if God is real. And I had this level of willingness. I also had a level of surrender in my heart, because it takes surrender to say, hey, God, I'm willing to encounter you, because you have to surrender what you think you know to perhaps experience what you don't yet know. You have to be willing to give up your old life to experience a new form of life. So I was in this particular place. Now, at the time, I didn't know God to be Jesus, Krishna, Buddha, the Mayan gods, any of them, right? To me, in the innocence and purity of my heart, God was just God. And I had some sort of idea that this God would be good. So I laid on my bed that particular evening. My girlfriend had fallen asleep next to me. Thank God, because if she'd have heard the next things coming out my mouth, she'd have said, "Oh, Jacob, what are you doing?" in a Russian accent. Um, but yeah, and I prayed, or I declared that evening that I wanted to know God. Something like, "Hey God, I want to know you. I want you in my life now. I have this feeling that you're real, but I'm not sure. But I want to follow you. I want my life to change." It was these kind of things that were coming out my mouth. And then I had an experience that evening, And when I woke up in the morning, I was different. And so much so that my girlfriend soon after that said, "There's a change in your eyes," but she didn't know about my change in heart, which is quite an interesting thing, eh? But because of that, I changed internally. Now I couldn't measure that in terms of with some hard facts, but I knew that I'd had some internal change, and I was aware of that change. And as I developed through the next few months, and as I kept following my heart, I changed more and more and more. And I'm reason that I've shared the snippet of the first part of enlightenment to my journey, if you will, is because the change that you have seen today has come from that particular moment in which was actually just a willingness to open myself up to the things of God, which now I have proof for. Now, I didn't measure anything to start with, and I couldn't measure anything now. But what I could do is open myself up to something. And that is the extension of the invitation for you to be open and to be willing. And then you will have your own proof of God. And again, Joe Bluggs might come next to you and say, "Well, I don't think it." But you won't care diddly squat. Trust me. The experiences that I've had with God, you could look me dead in the eye and say, "God is not real," and I wouldn't batter an eyelid. It doesn't matter to me because I know that I know that I know. He's more real than this bright camera looking at me, which why I squint my eyes every now and again. And trust me, that camera's real. Just putting my feet up a little bit. We're getting into it. So the whole idea that we can prove the existence of God is absolutely true. We can prove the existence of God, but you're the powerful one to do that. Rightio. So let's think about perhaps some steps we can take in order to have the proof that we so desire. Now, I'm going to interject just a tiny little bit here. Most people I speak to, atheists, agnostics, believers, whatever, we all have this innate desire to have an afterlife, something that goes beyond this life, life that doesn't just end when this carbon body comes to an end. We all have this desire. I see it across the board. It's very, very rare where I meet someone who's like, "Well, I just don't care. I want to die when I die." That's quite somber, right? Most people say, "I want life to be after death, of some sort of life after death," you know? So these kind of questions and things that we're rigorously going through on these videos, these are super important because they're likely to be in your heart already to figure out if this thing is real and if there is a possibility of life beyond the grave. So let's go into the next bit. We'll look at some practicalities of how we can start the journey of proof into God's realness, reality. Anyway, okay, so firstly, you got to be willing. There's no point starting out any journey if you're not willing to go on it. So willingness, I think, is maybe one of the components of willingness is to say, you know what? If this journey is going to be as spectacular, if this journey is going to be as real as perhaps is being proposed to me, I'm willing to give up my old life for that. I think that's a good place to start, and that ties into surrender. I was willing to give up my old way of life to have revealed to me a new way of life. So willingness is a big thing. And being willing to think differently. You know, some people are so stuck in their ways with how they think, man. There needs to be a fluidity to life where you expand your thought life, expand how you think, be willing to think differently. And I think those are the key things. And then actually to begin to engage with God in your heart. Now, what I mean by that is kind of like I did in Moscow, although 7 years ago, I believe it was, is I actually declared. Now, at the end of this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a declaration. Now, you can listen to my declaration, then afterwards you can repeat my declaration. But I think words are very powerful as we embark on proving that God is real for you. It is to declare your willingness, you know. Words are super, super powerful. You know, you've made someone smile with your words and you've probably made someone cry with your words. So we're going to use words today to declare some stuff towards the end of the video. And of course, this journey has to be a journey that is developing. It's not something that is a one-trick pony, and it isn't something that was built in a day. Like Rome wasn't built in a day, so you're not built in a day. God's not built in a day. But this is something that we're going to have to journey through, right? I had an experience, and my experience in one night changed my heart, you know. But a lot of people are different to that, and this is the beauty of this. This is going to be your own subjective experience. It's you. You've got it going on. It's your powerful experience. It's totally different to mine, and Your journey is different to mine and it's signature for you. So we've got to be willing to journey, not just jump off that pony after one declaration if we think we wake up in the morning and we don't feel any different. You have to be willing to go with it. And I think you have to be someone who's in pursuit of what the truth is and hold on to the truth dearly. So if we were to kind of put these things together that I've just mentioned before we embark on this declaration or this journey into proving that God is real: willingness, openness, almost a bit of resilience to the continuation of this journey, and to be willing to engage with God to have your experience. So now we've got these components, which I believe if we practice these or put these into practice, that we will actually have some foundations to say that, wow, I've proven that God is real. And let me tell you, this is just the start of a journey. There is so much love and joy and peace to be experienced from God. It will blow your absolute socks into the next parallel universe. But we have to start with a step, okay? So let's go on to a little bit more and then we'll do the declaration. So to tie all this together, we've said that we can't really prove the existence of God with hard facts. I mean, quantum physics is doing a good job, but I think it might be a few years till we can prove something. And we certainly can't prove the character of God even by quantum physics or any scientific method, because character can only be experience. So then we went on to explain that experience is something that helps us form an opinion, and that really, as intelligent beings, it forms who we are today. So if we seek after the experience of God and we open ourselves up to an experience of God, we can then change the degree our experience changes us, and thus it is who we are, and thus we have proof of something. That is in a nutshell. Now, I want to go on to the declaration, and I'm just going to say some words here, okay? And you can rewind this and repeat after me. And yeah, I'm just going to go for it. So, kind of similar to what I said in Moscow, is God, I want to know you. I want to know if you're real. I'm willing to change for that reality. I'm willing to give up an old way of living if this reality is real. God, I want to know your goodness. Christ, be with me. Christ, reveal yourself to me. I want to know who you are. There you go. A simple declaration. I didn't even need to put an amen on the end, and it still flipping works. But yeah, so hopefully you've rewound that and you've said it and you're about to embark on, or perhaps it could be said that you're already on a journey and this was just a little stepping stone on the next part. But this, again, is a journey that will take continuation. And I recommend and implore that you seek truth, that you take time for contemplation, that you take time to breathe and be, that you take time to seek for things like you see in these videos, or perhaps pick up a Bible and have a read of it, or watch other videos similar to this, and you begin to journey with your heart into truth. And I know and I trust that you will have the perfect proof for yourself that God is real, and you can wear a godlike smile every day knowing that the God who you know is your friend. And there is so much to be experienced with that. Guys, thank you for watching this. Shalom. By the way, if you're wondering, when I say shalom, what does that mean? It just means peace in Hebrew, and I like it. So shalom, and I will speak to you guys shortly. Bye-bye.